So what do you think of when I say propaganda?
I think of false information or biased information.
Okay. And what kind of images could you imagine when you hear that word?
Such as
So when I say propaganda, what do you think of?
Political messages, usually, at least in America, with the intention of getting people to support one politician or another.
Okay. And how do you think the propaganda affects you today?
It shows up in a lot of YouTube videos.
What kind of images come to mind when I say propaganda?
I mean, when I think of propaganda, I think of like World War II stuff that they used over in England and like things to get people rallied up against the Nazis and stuff like that.
So what do you think of when I say propaganda?
I guess World War II and Hitler and everything and brainwashing people.
Okay. And how do you think that propaganda affects you today? Like throughout history or today,
like communist governments.
how do you think that propaganda affects you today?
That's a good question. Well,
Propaganda is a powerful tool that has shaped economies and fueled wars. Throughout history, propaganda has been used by those in power to sway the public opinion in their favor. For many, the word immediately conjures up images of war propaganda. Some of the most well-known examples of propaganda are from World War I and II. However, some of the most common propaganda is not easily detected by the average person. We are constantly surrounded by inherently biased advertisements and campaigns, formulated to stick in viewers' minds and quickly infiltrate popular culture. We don't always realize that these instantly recognizable images are, in fact, propaganda. Corporations seek to boost profit by building a positive public reputation, achieved by presenting existing issues with bias, withholding incriminating information, or fabricating completely new stories. The hidden motives of corporations brings the ethicality of corporate propaganda into question. Both ethical and unethical propaganda can be observed on a daily basis. An ethical advertisement is one which presents completely factual information to the viewers. Robert Vaux of Demand Media advocates characteristics of ethical advertising, which consists of clear intentions, not relying on the audience's emotions, and being conscious of environmental factors. However, completely ethical propaganda is rare on the corporate level. There will almost always be dramatizations or emotional appeals. The numerous methods used by corporations to convey a positive image of their name and products are often poisoned by deceit. Mark Weiser of Global Research states that propaganda campaigns have been successful in keeping the general public from recognizing the truth. Oftentimes, companies will claim that their products will remedy some ailment. However, the claims are not always 100% accurate. An appeal to the audience's desire is perhaps the most recognizable in advertisements of the past century. Corporations will try to sell their products by showing an image of what the targeted audience desires, whether it be beauty, health, success, or any other characteristic of what the target audience wants in themselves. The appeal to desires can still be considered deceitful because of the use of other devices like Photoshop. A desirable image is made more effective through the enhancement of the desired aspects. These corporations use propaganda to bolster their public image when they are caught red-handed in a scandal or when it is revealed that they are making business deals or providing products that violate human rights. Perhaps one of the first examples of corporations using propaganda to cover up their own crimes was the Ludlow Massacre. This issue was sparked by the low wages of workers and the mine workers union, which led to intense riots. Instead of trying to negotiate with the revolting workers, John D. Rockefeller decided to send militia groups to quell the protests. In putting down the rioting, the militia group ended up killing 66 men, women, and children. An account filed by the New York Times verifies that in the mass of charred debris and buried beneath it is a story of horror unparalleled in the history of industrial warfare. One pit, uncovered the day after the massacre, disclosed the bodies of 10 children and 2 women. However, instead of owning up to the massacres, Rockefeller decided to cover up his actions by calling public attention to the massacre. A statement made by Rockefeller asserts that there was no Ludlow massacre. The engagement started as a desperate fight for life by 2 small squads of militia against the entire tent colony. There were no women or children shot by the authorities of the state or representatives of the operators. Since that time, the corporation's influence and control over public opinion has grown as new ways to communicate have developed. Mass media arguably began in 1912 when the first scheduled radio broadcasts began. Fast forward 30 years to the advent of television in the 1940s and 50s. By 1951, 12 million American families owned a TV set. Television commercials have not changed much since the 1950s. They always portray what is being advertised in a positive light, covering up or ignoring the negative aspects of the company funding the ad, which many viewers don't realize is a form of corporate propaganda. Today, this kind of advertising is even more prevalent. We now live in a world dependent on the internet. When social media emerged less than 10 years ago, corporations immediately took advantage of this new advertising opportunity, creating Facebook pages and Twitter accounts to be the new face of their company.
I guess one of the first questions that I wanted to ask is, how do you see corporate propaganda being used today?
I think there's a lot of different instances of it. Again, it goes back to a question of definition of how you're really defining propaganda. But if you're thinking of it in terms of simply marketing and advertising, I mean, obviously, there's probably more avenues for it today than ever before, simply because you have more methods of communication. So you have the internet, you have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, your typical stuff like TV ads, newspapers, those standard venues. If you're thinking of it in terms of PR and spin, then a lot of times it is damage control, like we talked about a few minutes ago, where a company has been, something has been outed. There's something that has been found out that may not be unethical necessarily, but it may not be something they wanted anybody to know about. So then they have to kind of go behind and do a little bit of cleanup and damage control, and then that's when they get their PR firms involved in it and really create a message to try to get you to forget about that stuff, but think about this stuff. Like, don't look over here, look over here. Fortunately, for most companies, the American attention span is pretty short, so it usually works.
In 2013, Wal-Mart was discovered to source goods from sweatshops and other disreputable sources. In order to offset the potential loss of sales from this scandal, they started a new initiative to reinforce their positive reputation and draw public attention away from the immoral acts committed by announcing on Facebook and Twitter, as well as their website, that they plan to hire 100,000 veterans by 2018. Whether they will follow through or not, they certainly fulfilled their goal of distracting their customers from the darker side of capitalism. Throughout history, propaganda has been used by those in power to stay in power. Large corporations use propaganda to shape their reputation and build the perception of credibility. The use of corporate propaganda in particular has evolved through the past 100 years to manipulate the public into favoring certain products or brands while distracting them from the unethical actions of the corporations.
And again, I think the only way it's ever going to stop is, and well, I don't know that it's ever going to stop, but the only way it's ever going to get better is if knowing consumers have more access to educate themselves and to kind of find you out, kind of forces people to be a little bit more honest about what they say.